We're looking at this huge skill shortfall, and that doesn't even take into consideration all the opportunities with technology adoption, right? When you add that in, we're looking at an even bigger skills gap in manufacturing.
It's a mindset shift. It's a decision, folks.
If we don't move the people that we have around, the jobs that they have might not be as relevant, but where are we going to get people from the outside?
Train instantly, train on anything, and be able to train anybody.
Today, it's AI. Tomorrow, well, who knows what's coming next?
Welcome back to the Work Intelligence Lab podcast. I'm Carla Fletcher, and the question today is, if talent is our most invaluable resource, how do we unlock it at scale? With a projected 2.1 million worker gap by 2030 in the US manufacturing alone, how do AI, augmented work, and skills adjacencies turn potential into performance? With that, I'm handing over the mic to my colleague, Rebekah Kowalski, to lead the conversation. Rebekah, over to you.
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Rebekah Kowalski, Head of Global Strategic Workforce Partnerships at ManpowerGroup. And with me today, we have Paul Ryznar, CEO and President of LightGuide Systems, Liz Stock, VP of Government Affairs and MXD Learn at MXD, and Alexandra Levitt, who is known to all of us as Alex and is a workforce futurist. So, Paul, I'm going to start with you. We are having a conversation increasingly about talent and how talent is really fundamentally the most renewable resource on the planet, in that it can actually adapt better. It can be incredibly resilient. It can change and it can morph in ways that may be unexpected. And so that's actually a big solution to the talent shortage paradox that we're facing. I think what's maybe frustrating for some folks is understanding, well, how is it that technology, which is evolving roles, actually creates a gateway of opportunity for individuals? Can you talk to us a little bit about that and how you're looking at it from a guided light perspective?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, just manufacturing in general has always been this great intersection of people and machines and data, all coming together, going all the way back to the Henry Ford days when they put the Model T in. And so it's really the same today in many ways, but people, still deliver an amazingly flexible solution in manufacturing, much more flexible than a lot of robots and other forms of ways that you can create things. And so people together with the right technologies can drive some amazing results into factory floors around the world. And so I think if you combine the right people with the right data and the right technologies, then it is going to be and continue to be a very powerful solution to drive much higher results in manufacturing. And also, it's going to be something that you can basically compete overseas with some of the lower wage countries if you can bring people back to onshore jobs here in the U.S. and be able to get a very good ROI for even, the higher cost wage countries.
So how does LightGuide Systems provide part of the solution for that?
So what we do is we replace paper and monitor work instructions, and we make complex manual processes as easy as following the lights. And that can involve assembly operations, inspection, part kitting, sequencing, wherever you've got people doing some form of manual work, we help those people and we empower them to build a brighter tomorrow, as we like to say. So we're running in about 36 countries around the world right now, helping to drive some amazing results onto factory floors, and typically with ROIs measured in weeks, not even months or years.
Wow, that's incredible. So Paul is talking about how his systems are a guiding light and brightening
Literally.
the future of workforce, quite literally. So Liz, tell us a little bit about how it looks to try to define how the work is actually going to evolve. We're sitting here at MXD today in the middle of a working factory floor that showcases some of the most exciting technology around, but that also means that there is another shift that the workforce has to make, and another and another. So as we're talking about technology that opens gateways, tell us about how you know where those gateways lead.
So there's a couple of different things that we look at for workforce development across the Institute. But one of the biggest things that we ground all of our work in is these workforce readiness guides. What does it look like to be prepared for these technologies, to be prepared for the adoption and implementation? How do we make sure the workforce is right there and ready with the technology, keeping pace? Because as you said, It's today, it's AI, tomorrow, well, who knows what's coming next. And over the 10 years of the Institute's life, we've seen all these different technologies come through, and each time the workforce is not there. The workforce is not ready. So we spend a tremendous amount of time looking at what is workforce readiness, what are the roles for these technologies and the implementation, what are the skills that are going to be required, what's the career pathway, how do you think about growth as either an individual or an employer, how does academia think about training and content development. We use these workforce readiness guides and the nearly 800 roles we've identified to drive all of that work to try and make sure that the workforce is at least keeping pace with the technology development.
That's really exciting. And one of the things that I've found so interesting about the research that we've done together and in many instances is the identification of adjacencies. So if someone is in a role today and has acquired some skills, what can they move into? What can they slide into so that we're not just looking at one career progression pathway? And Alex, you've talked about this from the perspective of talent intelligence. And I love that phrase. It's so much of a better phrase than, for instance, workforce planning or workforce strategy, because it really is about understanding how we can move talent, how they can move themselves, and thus create a more adaptable organization from adaptable and resilient individuals. So talk to us a little bit about that.
So talent intelligence is a type of AI-based technology platform that allows us in the recruiting function to look at candidates using a very, very large global data set and determine what they might be capable of doing next based on what they've done in the past. And so when you talk about skills adjacencies, that's where talent intelligence can do a really good job because they can identify adjacencies that we as human recruiters might not even be aware of. So one of my favorite examples of this is an organization that I worked with learned that people who were bartenders actually made really good call center reps because they had the same core interpersonal empathic skill set and that they were able to train bartenders relatively easily to do call center management because they already had that innate skill of knowing how to engage with people and get on their side and figure out what the problem was and listen. And so that's not an association that most human recruiters would readily make. And those are the people who never even get considered for certain jobs. It's like, oh, that person's a bartender. They're always going to be a bartender, or maybe they can be a restaurant server. But it allows us to think so much more broadly on who is capable of doing jobs within our organization, which hopefully will help us solve the talent shortage because we can deploy people into new types of roles, both from outside the organization and inside the organization as well, if we want to broadly skill them so that they can do as many different jobs as possible as business requirements shift and change.
I love that idea of zero waste and actually thinking about the roles in HR that have to do with workforce planning, workforce strategy. We talk a lot about how the tech roadmap needs to move in tandem with the workforce strategy roadmap, and no more so than right now. So when we're talking about AI and the significant evolutions that are coming our way, it's too easy sometimes to fall into, oh, the robots are coming to take my job, AI is coming to take my job, or everything is going to be great and easy because all of the benefits will accrue to the worker. So as a workforce futurist, why don't you tell us what you see as actual truth in terms of what's happening over the next few years? And then how does that outlook change over time?
Sure. Well, first of all, there is a gap between leaders' expectations of what AI is capable of achieving in the workplace and individual employees' ability to implement it in their individual job functions. What we see is a lot of employees being very confused. My leader has told me to use AI. Maybe I'm playing a little bit with ChatGPT, but I really don't know how this can specifically pertain to my job function and help me do my job better. And that's, in fact, what we need to be working on is the specificity of AI-based technologies for very concrete job functions, concrete departmental areas, concrete industries. And then we need to start evangelizing these case studies so that everyone else can get on board and say, okay, well, if that's a department that does something similar to mine. So maybe I can deploy AI in a similar way. And that's how it's really going to take hold within the organization. And the other thing that I would just say in general, and this doesn't have to do specifically with AI, is that we really need to be helping our people to develop what are called applied technology skills. So knowing, for example, that you can use talent intelligence to help with your recruiting efforts if you're facing a labor shortage and you can't get bodies in the door, this technology is available to help you broaden your talent pool so you can surface people who might be unknown to the top of the pile if they have the right innate skills. But that's an applied technology skill that you know that technology is available and roughly you know how to deploy it. And I think the problem that we're seeing now is that people just do not know what to do with all these new technologies. It's a shiny new toy,
Right.
but for a lot of people, it's just yet another thing they have to deal with and use it, rather than something that's actually helping them save time and efficiency.
I love this idea that I want to circle back on, which is, as you talked about the talent intelligence, the image that comes to me is the widening of the aperture. And so, Paul, I'm going to go back to you because one of the things that I've always thought was most exciting about LightGuide systems is the ability to kind of goose the supply of labor, because now I don't have to have the same set of requirements I did before. I can bypass language requirements. I can think about people that are underrepresented, have never been inside of a factory before in their lives. They don't actually necessarily even have the skills, but they may have an aptitude that hasn't yet been connected to a skill in action, because again, they've never been on a factory floor. There's even application for individuals with cognitive disabilities, physical disabilities. And so I get really excited when I see this kind of AI, AR kind of technology coming into place, because actually that becomes a force multiplier in terms of looking at supplies. So can you tell us a little bit about how that has been evolving?
Yeah, I mean, totally agree. And that force multiplier is really combining a lot of these technologies into something that can really be proven and practical, on a factory floor. So the combination of artificial intelligence together with augmented reality really provides a augmented intelligence type of platform now that can really be a practical and proven technology on a factory floor. In other words, allowing people to be trained instantly, not hours and hours of training anymore, on anything. So train instantly, train on anything, and be able to train anybody. If you can combine those three facets of training, you've got somebody that's going to be very productive much faster than the old way, of being able to train somebody. And finally, after 3 or 4 weeks on the job, you feel, they're qualified to be able to do their job. So if you can truly do that and bring somebody in right off the street that's never been building a fuel injector before or an electric vehicle battery or whatever that part is, and have them be immediately productive, that drives a very, very fast bottom line, and it makes the operational flexibility as high as possible.
It's super powerful. And so what I don't want our audience to miss today is we're talking about this is from a technology perspective. The opportunities are huge, not just in terms of the potential for multiplying jobs and multiplying supply, but actually creating a pathway for individuals who haven't had the dignity of work.
Right.
And that's incredible as far as I'm concerned. So maybe we've been having the wrong conversation about certain erosions happening too quickly. What we should be doing is saying, well, how do we look at lifting up workforce using that technology to close a gap that is pretty immediate and pervasive now? And so, Liz, I'm going to turn to you because you know the stats so incredibly well. You live them every single day. In manufacturing alone, it's a massive gap, right? And there are gaps everywhere, right? But in manufacturing, to make the floor modern, to make it digital, to make it secure, I mean, it is like a massive chasm between what we have, what we need, both skills-wise and in terms of the number of people, because we have a lot falling out and not enough coming in to replace them. So you talked about these guides that you've created. How can that help organizations get a jump start?
Right. So manufacturing is projected to have a 2.1 million worker gap in the U.S. by 2030. largely due to not just the sheer number of people, but the skills individuals have. So all the things you were just highlighting, we can't recruit, we can't retain. We have a large set of current workers who are looking at retirement. We're not able to fill. We're not able to retain the knowledge they have. So key part of these workforce readiness guides, which we did in partnership with Manpower, all 4 of them that we have ready right now, is to look at how do we look at the talent we have currently? How do we look at the skills that we need? How do we create a different pool of individuals in the manufacturing workspace? Right now, it's a lot of, I work here because I knew somebody who worked here and they pulled me in when I was looking for a job, or I work here because my family's been a part of this company. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not going to address the gap we have. So we're looking at this huge skill shortfall, and that doesn't even take into consideration all the opportunities with technology adoption, right? When you add that in, we're looking at an even bigger skills gap in manufacturing. So these guides, these workforce readiness guides, are there to help provide really a roadmap for how to think about the workforce you have in manufacturing and the workforce you need. But also, we're not talking about sort of a greenfield approach here.
Right.
We're going to take the talent we have now that we have access to, currently employed with manufacturing, those who may not even know that manufacturing could be a good career for them, as Alex was talking about. We found through some of the work we're doing with the Department of Defense, there's a set of individuals within the Air Force, in a specific field within the Air Force, who are moving into civilian life, who are actually particularly interested in one of our cybersecurity specialist roles. And they've indicated that through a resource we have online. And they're able to say, I'd like to do more in there. I'd like to go through some training.
Right.
We would have never put those 2 together before, but these roadmaps that outline skills and requirements and sort of career pathways give us the information we need to be able to do that matchmaking.
Yeah, that's wonderful. The idea of the matchmaking taken at an organizational level, I think to myself, no one has to be left behind.
Right.
But organizations sometimes make choices without even realizing that that might have an impact on leaving people behind. So Alex, to you, culturally, what do you think has to happen to start thinking more creatively? I always like to use the term shop from my own closet, right? We have the talent inside of the organization. There's talent in the communities outside of that organization. But all too often, we've seen the headlines. There's a shift made because of new technology that's come in, or a different path on a product or a process inside of an organization. And the fallout is all too human.
Yeah.
And yet, shortly thereafter, there's a need in another part of the organization. So they then have to bring back in. So what has to happen? What's the shift that needs to be reflected in the culture of an organization to not be so wasteful when it comes to talent?
And by the way, cautionary tale, we saw this with the airline industry. They let a whole bunch of people go during the pandemic because travel had stopped. And so it wasn't necessary to have those individuals when, in fact, those people possessed a great deal of institutional knowledge. They knew how to do many things within the organization. And it is 5 years later, and the airlines are still trying to get those people back.
Yes.
There has been a labor shortage for the last 3 years. They cannot hire people. We see what's happening with air traffic control at Newark and others. It's kind of disastrous right now. So let that be a warning to all of us to not be wasteful with our talent. I think we hear the term skills-based organization thrown around a lot. But what that means from a practical standpoint is we have to be willing to revisit our hierarchies, recognize that there are going to be levels that don't necessarily need to be there, and that every job has to be redesigned. And HR professionals do struggle with this notion because it is a lot of work to break down a traditional job into its component parts of work to be done. But that really is the easiest way to map skills and to be able to mix and match people with roles and be able to broadly skill them and deploy them in a way that we weren't able to do before because we were so
used for AI, right?
Yeah.
To do some of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, exactly. And then what comes after this is creating a skills taxonomy or a skills inventory of your organization. So it sounds like some of the work that Liz has been involved with, where we are actually keeping track of all the skills that currently exist and their level of relevance. So we did this with some of the sustainability work. Is this a skill that is going to progress further into the 21st century? Is it becoming obsolete? What are the new skills that are arising? And how do we close those gaps? And this just really allows you to move people around a lot more seamlessly. And I think at the end of the day, that's what we want to see happen, because it has to happen from the perspective of, if we don't move the people that we have around, the jobs that they have might not be as relevant, but where are we going to get people from the outside? So being able to strategically redeploy people and have them be as broadly skilled as possible is something that we have to be thinking about from a cultural perspective. I think right now we still see that a lot of organizations are very territorial. You get into one thing, you're kind of pigeonholed into that thing. Managers don't want to let good people go. And internal mobility makes business sense. So we really, really have to be starting to think about what's best for the organization as a whole, not just my department or my team. And that is to retain people by skilling them more broadly.
And shifting from the specialist to a versatilist, right? Which is the ultimate game, especially in a time that I think all of us are facing, which is rigidity does not suit us very well for ongoing crisis or uncertainty.
That's right.
And so we have to figure out how we make the individual adaptable, the organization adaptable, and process adaptable. Otherwise, we cannot actually continue forward. Paul, your thoughts on that?
Well, I just want to revisit a little bit of and echo what both Liz and Alex said. Basically revisit your hierarchy, right? And 2.1 million people in 2030 that, we're going to be basically not able to fill those manufacturing jobs right now. There'll be openings, and understanding your skill sets. I think we just got to get very creative, on how we do that, right? And take a look at things like employ more people with disabilities, because there's about 1.3 billion people around the world that have some form of a physical or mental disability, which is about 17% of the worldwide population. So you got, just in the U.S., 2.1 million people that we're not going to be able to find people to do these manufacturing jobs. But you got this whole pool of people that in many ways they want to work. They want to be productive. They just need the right technologies to allow them to do so. And so that's a huge opportunity to get creative and benefit, people, as well as, a lot of the other ways we can help to drive, creative change forward. And it's interesting, one example of that, from a creative example, is Mumbai, India has a restaurant that employs only people with either a hearing disability or impairment or completely deaf. And so if you walk into the restaurant, the menus teach you how to order in sign language. So there's no other way to order. So it basically is allowing them to employ somebody that may be deaf or hearing impaired, but it also places a little bit of the burden on the customers, because now they have to accommodate the person that is deaf and can't hear them and learn how to order in sign language. I think it's a great example of ways that we can both employ people and fill openings, but also be accommodating, to make them successful.
And you create a moment of community when you do that, which I think is so incredibly important, because when we go to work and we experience humanity and community. And so what you're describing is this beautiful example of lifting that community moment up into an everyday moment. I think that's fantastic. And I also don't want to miss the point that the technology makes the invisible visible from a workforce perspective.
Right.
Like, we have to think differently. Otherwise, the chasm that you're talking about, Liz, cannot be filled. It cannot be done in the old mode of doing things. So thank you for that, Paul. Liz, your final thoughts.
So actually, I'm going to build a little bit on what Paul said here, which is, so there's, in the example you just gave, one of the other key elements of what's happening at that restaurant is that you are offering a very simple, very quick training. You are offering access to learning and training. The menu shows you how to order. Most people walking in probably don't know sign language, but now they've got what they need right in front of them, easy to access, so that they are able to engage, build the community, provide both opportunities and benefits for everyone who is in that restaurant. So the piece that I would add to that is the importance of not only creating the opportunity, but providing the right set of resources to the audience that you are serving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really critical piece of all of this, whether that is a menu or an online program or a short course micro-credentialing. That piece has to be there. It's not enough to say, oh, there's a need here, there's a gap here, we can fill this job if somebody's interested. It's we have a need here, and here's how to get there.
Right.
And I think that piece is just as critical, and one that I want to make sure we don't lose sight of, because this mindset of continuous learning and access to education is so important.
Yeah, it's equipping in the moment, and it's a series of light lifts. Right. Sometimes when people hear continuous learning, the phrase makes them exhausted. If you're in an L&D department, you're thinking it's expensive, but the reality can be so much simpler. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. Alex, your final thoughts.
Sure. Well, first of all, Liz is absolutely right. We need to provide people with the how. How do you get from point A to point B? And I'd also like to add something about discouraged workers. One thing that we see dropping radically is the labor force participation rate. And this tends to go under the radar because we focus more on unemployment. But unemployment only takes into account people who are actively looking for work.
Right.
If you are disabled, for example, or you are down on your luck and you're just really in a bad way, you might not be looking for work, and therefore you're not included in the unemployment rate. But those are the folks that we should be trying to motivate into the workforce. So I think offering those trainings in real time is very important. Also recognizing that there's things we've never trained people on at all, like the oversight of smart machines, knowing how to engage with a piece of AI-based technology in a way that is intuitive, in a way that provides ethical context, in a way that's going to be easy to explain its insights to decision makers. These are skills that nobody has. And we can't just expect somebody to start overseeing AI, as Liz said, without the proper tools.
Right.
So that's that. And then the last thing I'll say is just that recognize that the social contract between employer and employee is changing. And this means that the experience that we provide to the employee has to be a little bit different. And how is it different? It needs to be more holistic, more empathic, end-to-end, infused by technology to track people and help them along the way with both their learning, their career growth, and their well-being from the time they're a candidate all the way until the time they're off-boarded.
It's such an important point. At a time of uncertainty, people are looking for a path. Right. And so not providing a vision of what is possible. And at this point, it's more than one possibility. So how do you give a view of career progression pathways to individuals? And in fact, use technology to market those pathways based on talent intelligence, based on looking at adjacencies and need, so they can understand that they have a place, they're moving in the journey. And the guides provide such a nice way of looking at that. Technology like LightGuide provides such a great way for people to access. Right. And then understanding culturally what the lift is. It's a mindset shift. It's a decision, folks, that we're not going to be wasteful about talent. We're going to be purposeful, and everyone will benefit. So I'd like to thank all three of you for joining us today. It's terrific to have had you with us. I hope you all enjoyed your time with our guests. Thank you so much for joining us for the Work Intelligence Lab podcast.